testicles. Tugging testicles, testing the tugged testicles. There we go. I think that should make me demonetized right here in the beginning of the stream, so that's awesome. Let's get going. We've got a panel of dudes right now with the potential of a woman joining us a little later. Rose possibly might if she can get out of this like LP meeting, which I'm hoping she does. We've got some cool discussions that we can have tonight. I'm going to first, before we do anything else, make sure that the audio is still working. Do anything cool? Yeah. Somebody say sound.
Sound.
Hello.
Sound.
Sound.
Cool. All right. So we've got everything set up now. The subject today, other than my promise that I'm not on cocaine because I'm twitching a lot, I've got manic energy this evening, is... I don't, but that's a separate stream. The general gist of like this stream is going to be Elon Musk. Bad? Good? Bud? Gad? Will we be saying the right words or the wrong words about him? And I have a lot of negative things to say because I'm an asshole, and also because I know things. So I've also got like somebody who's slightly more neutral on like some of it, Keith. Slightly more neutral on some of it, Kareem, because Kareem is going to be more neutral on the like AI elements of it and shit like that. And I've got somebody who's pro, who is Aaron over here. So let's start with the pro Elon Musk person who is objectively wrong.
Oh my God!
No, I want to preface this though. I'm gonna steal man. I want to actually have good arguments here. So if I'm wrong, I will accept that I'm wrong. But I don't think I am, because I think I've thought about this the right thinky way. So we'll see. We'll see if the voices are correct or if we're all wrong. But we'll start with Aaron. We'll go to Keith. We'll go to Kareem. Who be you and where be you at?
Well, my name is Aaron. I live in Los Angeles. I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. I don't think he's perfect, but I'm definitely pro. He's a net positive for society as a whole, for sure. And I have the benefit of watching Falcon 9 rockets launch from right out of my front yard pretty regularly. So that's about it.
Cool. Keith.
Well, I've been on this stream before, but for those who don't know who I am, my name is Keith Preston. You can find out more about me at a website called attackthesystem.com, or just Google my name. Google Keith Preston, anarchist. You can find all kinds of stuff about me, you know, good and bad from the whatever point of view you have. But as far as my take on Elon Musk, I see Elon Musk the same way that I see a lot of these other tech oligarchs, whether it's Bezos or Peter Thiel or Zuckerberg and you know, all of the tech oligarchs that have emerged in recent times. I would compare them to the industrial oligarchs that emerged in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution. These names like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford.
Hey, you can't say Carnegie, you're white. No, sorry, I had to. So go.
I've heard it pronounced Carnegie and Carnegie. So,
no, I have no issue with that. It's just, it sounds a lot like another word, so I just had to throw that joke out there. Go.
Okay. But, you know, I suppose my take on the industrial oligarchs of the 19th century would essentially be the same as the Marxist take. You know, if you go back and you look at what Marx actually said about capitalism, he said that capitalism was great. He said capitalism had the effect of creating a lot more abundance than what had previously existed. It had broken down a lot of retrograde social structures. It had been a great leap forward for humanity, but it also created a lot of negative side effects, and that's what Marxism ostensibly was about trying to address, like the growth of this massive urbanized proletarian class and things like that. And I'd say that the you know, just like the 19th century was a time of the Industrial Revolution, the 21st century is the time of the digital capitalist revolution. And these guys like Musk and Bezos and Thiel and Gates and others are the modern robber barons, of the modern version of the industrial oligarchs of the 19th century, like Rockefeller and Ford. And big picture wise, you could say that contemporary times are also witnessing a great leap forward for humanity, in the sense that we're able to do things we could never do before. We've seen tremendous advancements on a lot of fronts. We've seen a lot of different cultural and social progress in a lot of ways. But none of these things have come without cost, where there's no negative social effects at all. And just like the Industrial Revolution had the impact of replacing the older royal systems, the traditional aristocracy and the clerisy and all of that, it replaced all of that with this new ruling class of the industrial bourgeoisie, or the industrial capitalist oligarchs. The same thing is happening now, where we're starting to see older forms of capitalism being replaced by newer forms of capitalism, and consequently a new set of oligarchs have emerged. And the more powerful the oligarchs are becoming, the more they're starting to exercise their muscle. For a while, when the tech oligarchs were a rising force, they tended to align themselves with the liberal wing of the ruling class, because that's typically what upperly mobile sectors of society do. They tend to align themselves with the left wing of the ruling class. But now the tech oligarchs have become so powerful that they've split into multiple factions. You've got some that are on the left, some on the right, some in the center. I mean, within the ranks of the elite. I'm not talking about the left, like socialism and communism and all that. So you have somebody like Gates or Mark Cuban who tend to align themselves with the liberal wing of the ruling class. You've got Musk and Peter Thiel on the right wing of the ruling class. And then you've got somebody like, nowadays it looks like Zuckerberg and Bezos and some others are trying to work the middle. They're trying to work both ends at the same time. And that's who these people are today. They're the modern Henry Ford, John Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Mellon, all of these oligarchs of the 19th century. So that they're becoming a hegemonic force within the ruling class itself. And while some of the things that they do may be beneficial, I like the idea of being able to have space stations and Martian colonies and all that kind of stuff. I grew up watching Star Trek and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff, so I'm down with all that. But at the same time, these guys are able to exercise political power and economic power in a way that creates all kinds of problems. And I think we've seen that happening in the political realm. It's like one of the problems with oligarchy, with capitalist oligarchy, is that the oligarchs eventually take over the state. And we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see that in this incoming Trump regime, we're starting to see this kind of oligarch first, plutocrat first, and I would add to that Israel first regime coming in. And we see parallels to that on the other side of the political spectrum in the United States as well. And this is a worldwide thing, not just an American thing. So what typically happens is that, even though a new ruling class that emerges from a change in material conditions can be a step forward, it then becomes necessary to effectively combat that ruling class once it is an established ruling class. It's like, maybe the tech oligarchs are an improvement over old school industrial oligarchs or not, but it's still necessary to combat their hegemonic influence. Just like, if you might have a new government come in, and maybe it's an improvement over the past government, but it might still be necessary to combat this new government for some other reasons, or for many reasons.
Well, so
I think that's where we are now with Elon Musk and people like that.
Right, and so we'll let Kareem introduce himself and maybe give his take, and then we'll move to Aaron, and I think so. Just a quick response. I think people have a tendency to look at the surface, to look at the general aesthetic differences between certain things, and not actually the actual root, the material conditions, the foundations, and the sort of actual shit that exists on the ground. And maybe kids not getting their limbs chopped off by industrial equipment seems like an improvement over the old, but if you replace those kids with underpaid workers and then use the fact that those workers are underpaid and unionizing and demanding better labor compensation as a way to justify for instance, replacing them with AI and machines and shit, and your factory floor looks a whole lot less gruesome than previous factory floors, but also it's because you threw the people out who would normally do that onto the homelessness spectrum. It's like it's aesthetically different. It's aesthetically better. It may seem cleaner and more efficient and whatever, but it took a lot of shit out with it on its way, and I would say that there's a lot of bodies in the wake of this. So, also I'll throw it to Kareem, then Aaron, and then probably I'll have some shit to say, and then I'll throw it back to Keith.
All right, so I'll keep this brief. I'm Kareem. You can find me on Twitter at Kareem6633, CryptoDaxWorld. You can also find me. I have a Blue Sky account as well, Facebook, all that good stuff, Anarch Unity, and I do recommend Attack the System as well. My thoughts on Musk are generally negative. Now, maybe I agree with him that birth rate is declining and that's bad. Because if you don't have people, then it can cause I'm not a Malthusian. And Kropotkin was actually the first one to disprove Malthusian theory, not Rothbard, which is kind of funny because ANCAPs are in love with Rothbard, but Kropotkin's like a scary communist.
Right, and real quick, like delve into that, because if I understand correctly, you're talking about like his sort of like mutual aid kind of mentality.
Yeah, basically like Kropotkin debunked Malthus, which actually found and said, hey, like there's enough mutual aid to go around. It's not a zero-sum game of like we got to beat each other down for resources. And he did a good job of that. I like Rocker, better than Kropotkin and Bakunin because he laid out more of a foundation of how an anarchist society would work as opposed to just criticizing the state, but he did good. Now, aside from that, he gets money from DARPA. It's very clear. Those departments. I'm sure he gets money from other departments. He gets tons of subsidies. NASA. He also advocates, and I'm fine with like space exploration and stuff like that, but I would rather focus on like the planet we have now. Like Mars is great. William Godwin was attacking Malthus a century before Kropotkin, so even then. But I would rather focus on the planet we have now.
Right.
Also, there's this. It's kind of almost, I would say simping for Trump and other leaders that just and trying to influence their politics or doing whatever is there. I don't like that. I also think, and the biggest thing that I would have against Elon Musk though is the more and more I look into it, the more and more I think about it. Elon Musk is like, I'm against work from home. He's not necessarily Musk, Bezos. I want to say Zuckerberg. I want to say some of these people. I don't know exactly all these work environments. I did work for a big tech company, but actually it was, but the rest of them, I will say this. And this is why I'm gonna talk to Chris. If things were truly leveled, and I'm not saying redistribute wealth because that doesn't work either, but let's just say like
I can make a case for that. We'll do that on another stream.
No, because I mean you could, but the problem is the state would do that and the state would mess it up. So no, but I'd say if everything was equal, like if Bezos didn't have this money and Zuckerberg didn't have that money and Spiel didn't have that money, I really believe they wouldn't be in this position. In it because they take profits that have existed, reinvest them, as Chris says, owners own, owners take, and
Chris.
Workers. Yeah, Chris from It Had to Be Said.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest behind me is if you really look into literature of it, if you look into it from, I would say, the factories to the diggers to the levelers.
You can't say digger, you're white. Go ahead.
Wow. You got me in trouble.
Go ahead.
Definitely getting demonetized. But workers' self-management industries do make sense to me. A lot of people would say, well, how could that ever work? I think workers, if they really said, hey, we're in charge of it, without Bill Gates, stealing Windows and without Elon stealing whatever he stole, and without these people having huge advantages to start with. I'm not going to say I didn't have some advantages as well, but without doing this, I think workers would come up with ways, instead of working under some tech oligarch to say, hey, we want to have self-management industries, and we'll come up with ways to automate. And a lot of people don't like to, acknowledge this. But I was talking even to Jack and other ANCAPs and some of my friends. This is not an anti-ANCAP stream, but I said, hey, look, anarcho-capitalism worked pretty good in medieval Iceland, if you consider that anarcho-capitalism, and in Kospaya. But self-worker, if you want to call them self-run, self-managed, self-autonomized worker zones worked really well in Spain. And they could work potentially very well in Rojava if the conflict goes down. I think they could work well in Frejuvе. I think they can work well in Venezuela. And I think they can work well in Chiran. So there's huge potential, in my opinion, if you got rid of CEOs and you just had workers co-ops or people who founded a company and said, let the workers run it and automate it. I'm not going to be beholden over them over a factory floor, that they would create the innovation needed to achieve real freedom. And by real freedom, I don't mean the freedom to work or starve. I mean the freedom to actually automate, or the freedom to work how they want so they can have a balance and also live their life.
So, Aaron, you are pro Elon Musk. Let's get...
Yes.
I want to run this like sort of like a Q&A panel. Let's start with like 2 reasons that you are pro Elon Musk.
Well, first, I would say the Tesla Motor Company. Second, I would say SpaceX. But there's more good reasons besides just those 2. Tesla made the world's best-selling EV. He brought EVs into the mainstream. I don't think Ford, Chevy, and these other companies would have EVs as developed as they have without the pressure from Tesla helping to push it in that direction. And I am kind of a fan of green tech. I have solar panels on my roof. And I think that moving the automotive industry into the EV era needs to be kind of like pushed forward, and government isn't always going to be the right or only tool to push it forward.
So, real quick, I'll just
Yeah.
because I just gotta say, like, before we proceed too much, Tesla, the reason it got where it is and is not bankrupt right now is because of regulatory credits. The government literally took money from other auto manufacturers and gave it to Elon Musk. So maybe the reason that they didn't have the resources to do what you're saying they should have is because of that, and maybe it shouldn't be divorced from government, the things that Elon did, because he was literally funded by wealth redistribution. Additionally, similarly, like SpaceX uses NASA launch facilities. It uses government grants for, like, it directly works with NASA engineers and astronauts, and it also gets a bunch of contracts to operate alongside people like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and a bunch of other military and intelligence industrial contractors, because they literally have the same interests. And they're building a surveillance satellite network with that for the government. They've given like assets to governments so that they can use them for their war machines. I don't consider it not using government. That's all I'll say so far. But I don't want to interrupt you. You've got some time to speak your piece.
Sure. So I understand. So focusing on Tesla just for the moment. So it is true that Tesla, along with all other EV manufacturers, have received government subsidies, and there's tax credits on the consumer end, and there's other incentives that they do with that, both for the corporate side and the consumer side, to help kind of spur along EV adoption. But the government also gives a lot of subsidies to oil companies. They also subsidize tire companies. They subsidize engine manufacturers that use, these engines that use petroleum and things like that. So it's not like the EV subsidies are necessarily unique. I'm not exactly a fan of the subsidies for automotive industry at all, whether it's gas or EV. But Tesla right now makes EVs that are already profitable, and Elon has repeatedly said that he's not even a fan of the tax credits and those other consumer side subsidies that help spur on the adoption. But even if even if you
Well,
say that, even if you say that the government has like started these subsidies and these programs to make EVs, or help Tesla and other companies along, I don't think that's going to make Elon a bad person. I don't think that's a mark against him. I don't think, just like I don't think that's a mark against Ford or Chevy for also getting subsidies.
but do you know what a regulatory credit is?
A regulatory credit as opposed to a tax credit?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me what the regulatory credit is and why it makes Elon bad.
So if Elon's gonna say that he doesn't support government, subsidies and all that sort of thing, grants and whatever, and then he takes a regulatory credit, that's direct hypocrisy, because a regulatory credit isn't a tax. What it is the government. I mean, it's still fundamentally theft, but
Is that one of those green credits or something else?
it's a type
What's
of
the
green
regular?
credit, but it's a more direct thing. So what it does is it doesn't tax the common person at all. What it does is it says, Ford, you didn't meet our green specifications this year, so you have to give us extra money. And instead of just taking that money for U.S. government proposals, the regulatory credit will go into manufacturers who are compliant with the regulations. And so Tesla has been like strung along past multiple times, like potential bankruptcies, because of these, like this direct wealth transfer from people like Ford, Chevy, etc., to Tesla directly through the government. Elon Musk what?
Was this legislation that Elon wrote?
No, but it's legislation that he used.
Okay, gotcha.
Like,
All right.
and he relied on that for many years. It's not just a one-off thing. So if
Okay.
he's going to then say that I don't like that sort of thing, that to me just sounds like, oh, stop giving me money. I hate money. Don't do that. No, I hate
Well,
taking this money.
Sure, let's give him a taste of his own medicine, or give him what he asks for, and end those things. I don't expect the government to do that, because I do think the government has a political interest in just making EVs move along anyway. That might change in the Trump world. It seems like he might cut some EV stuff, and we'll see who gets. But here's what I'll tell you: if the government cuts off or reduces funding for the EV industry as a whole, and doesn't pick favorites among manufacturers, I firmly believe that companies like GM and Ford are going to pull back harder on EV manufacture than Tesla will. I think Tesla will persevere and continue manufacturing, while the traditional automakers will be the ones that are going to have their EV production get cut way more, because those are the ones that are already producing units that are not profitable.
Well, right, but partially that's because the units that they're producing that are not profitable are operating at a partial loss, because they still have to sell enough of the other units in order to make more electric units, and they have to sell more of the original units, which is worse for the planet, because the regulatory credits mean they have less gross capital and less net, certainly, at the end of their accounting session. So it's a different thing where, like, because of the regulatory credits, the manufacturers that are allegedly supposed to do better don't really have the free capital to do better, because it's costing them, I think, like billions of dollars a year in total to send that money directly to Elon Musk.
Yeah, well, so I'm definitely not going to defend like regulatory credits, and on the same side, I won't defend like consumer tax deductions. Even though I don't like taxes, I don't like the idea of like a EV tax credit. So when I bought my Tesla, like there's not some box that you can check that's optional to get the credit. Like they automatically just do it. You know what I mean? The manufacturer is not going to sell you the car without doing that, and that's just the way it is. So I benefited from it. I'm not a fan of it. I'd like to see it ended. And I don't know. I don't think that makes me a bad person. I did not write that legislation,
Well, I mean,
so I could say yeah, Tesla benefits from these things. The government helps spur it along. Maybe the Tesla wouldn't exist without the government, and maybe the electric version of the F-150 also wouldn't exist without government. But I don't think that makes Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, a bad guy. I don't think it makes Elon Musk a bad guy that they're taking advantage of these government programs that they did not write, did not vote for, did not put into law.
I mean, but not writing or voting for it as a politician does not mean that you're not complicit in the system. Using that mentality, the vast majority of alleged commies are totally fine, even under a sort of USSR mentality. So a lot of your criticisms of the left that you post on Facebook and shit would be kneecapped if that were the case.
I should post a lot a lot of my troll memes. Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
All I'm okay. So here's the thing: I'm not caping for Ford. Ford was a Nazi. His company sucks. I'm not saying that I love the whole shit here. But what I am saying is that if we're going to be consistent, we have to say that if it's bad for like a company to take these sorts of things, and if Elon Musk is going to say that, then he has to admit that it's bad when he does it for his own purposes. And if he's not going to do that, then it's because he's willing to virtue signal about something from which he benefits in order to garner an audience of people who will say it's okay when he does it. That's known as hypocrisy. The Christians would call him a false prophet if they didn't have his cock up their ass. So, like, that's the general vibe that I want to give off. Like, there's a whole lot of problems with his, like, level of consistency. Like, he would not, his companies would not exist in their current form without massive amounts of government money and support. So, and that's why he's getting, like, you know, his AI company is getting massive amounts of funds from the people that people allegedly don't like, right? Like, I mean, his AI companies are being funded by BlackRock, and like Nvidia, A16, Fidelity, Kingdom Holdings, Lightspeed, MGX, Morgan Stanley, OIA, QIA, Sequoia Capital, Valor Equity Partners, Vi Capital, AMD. All of these major players are directly giving him money to do basically their bidding. And like everybody else would like assume that because of all of this funding that they owned it. Like everybody talked last year about how BlackRock owns everything last year. It's not 2025 yet.
They own a lot of stuff.
Over the last year is what I should have said, but like they're talking about how BlackRock owns everything and they own everything.
Yeah.
But then the same people will ignore that BlackRock owns the same kind of shit in Tesla and SpaceX and XAI and all of these companies that Elon Musk is a part of because he's one of us. Yeah. He's one of the good guys. He says "fuck yourself" in the face on Twitter. So
that was amazing.
See.
So what's wrong with Nvidia and AMD investing in an AI company? I don't understand how that's bad. I'm a big fan of Nvidia graphics cards. I have one in my computer right now. I've occasionally purchased AMD chips. You know, like you're talking about.
You're doing spotlight fallacy.
I pay a property tax and my kids go to a public school. And I like the idea of privatizing the education system. So would I be a bad person if I took advantage of a public school while I also, do I'm doing the Boers comic, with the straws on my back, and we should privatize society somewhat. But you use the government. That's not like I could pick my battles.
That's not necessarily battles. That's not necessarily improvement. And if the Nvidia guy, right? If the people behind Nvidia make a huge amount of money off of
that'll make me happy.
Make a huge amount of money off of a guy who also has a bunch of industrialists giving him that money to spend, and those industrialists are connected to the state, then it's not better than regulatory capture. It's not better than than some sort of state capitalist apparatus. It's just what I mean, Keith, we'll go back to him soon. What Keith would say is that it's just more robber baron shit. It's like the same sorts of mentalities that led to mass government spending with the Rockefellers, Carnegie, and a bunch of other people like that.
Also, Elon ran around for the better part of a year, I would say. Better part of probably 2 years, and said AI is going to kill all humanity. AI is going to make us he went Ted K on that without
he
delivering anything. Is that a good way to say it? And Biden should have pardoned Teddy K because he was good at management.
In my previous video with Jeremiah, I was pro AI. I've always been pro AI, and whenever Elon, and I like what you pointed out, Kareem, and I agree with you. And when Elon was coming out hard on this anti-AI shit, I never felt him on it. I never agreed with him ever, and I always thought this is a big L for Elon. Now I'm actually glad that he's coming around and being pro AI because I'm pro AI, and And I thought it was stupid when he was all freaking out and being anti-AI. So I'll take that for what it is.
So,
But
Keith, real quick, like, let briefly discuss, like, give like a 5-minute spiel on the robber barons of old, and like cap it off with how like this qualifies as a modern version of that. What is a robber baron? Why were they called that? And why is these modern cunts the them of now?
Well, robber barons were just, it was just sort of a derogatory term that was used to describe the industrial oligarchs of the 19th century. They were called robber barons because they were viewed as basically robbing the public, accumulating vast portions of wealth by, robbing the working class and by robbing the general public. But all of them emerged from the technological innovation that happened in the 19th century. I think that's the important thing to focus on if we want to consider the robber barons and their relevance to today. Because of the technological changes that happened during the Industrial Revolution, you had a whole new class of people who amassed huge fortunes within these new industries that were based on these new technologies in ways that would have been impossible before. And the exact same process has repeated itself in the late 20th and early 21st century with the advent of the kind of technological expansion we've seen in recent time, digital technology. Digital capitalism is to the early 21st century what industrial capitalism is to the 19th century. And these guys, these tech oligarchs that we have today are made possible by these technological changes. There wouldn't have been an Elon Musk 50 years ago because the technology for that was not available. But the criticisms of the robber barons were that they not only did they amass these vast fortunes through things like exploitation of workers, they were widely criticized for the working conditions in their facilities, but they also did it through collusion with the state in various ways. There were virtually no robber barons that made these kinds of fortunes just through sheer entrepreneurship. Like a lot of people have this idealized view of capitalists where they think capitalists are people who start off running a lemonade stand and then people just like their lemonade so much that they just develop a lemonade empire. That's like, so somebody amasses a few billion dollars, from their empire of lemonade stands, and it doesn't work that way. To get to the point where you have that kind of money, where you have literally billions upon billions of dollars, you can only do that through collusion, first of all, with other capitalists that are typically more, higher in the socioeconomic hierarchy than you are at the time, but also through the state as well. There's no such thing as non-state capitalism unless you want to say that some little kid's lemonade stand is capitalism. That's not really how I would define capitalism. But trade and commerce have existed since time immemorial. Like long before what is called capitalism came into being, trade and commerce existed. So it's capitalism and trade and commerce are not the same thing. But what happens in the early modern period and in the 19th century is that you have a situation where for the first time in history, the merchant class starts to become the ruling class, and that's compounded by industrialization and the impact of industrial technology, and that created the kinds of ruling class you saw during the robber baron period, and that's continued and been modified over time, but now it's going through another permutation with the rise of these tech oligarchs. Like if we look at ruling classes worldwide, we can see that ruling classes are made up of new money, old money, and very old money. Like very old money would be money that goes back to the early modern period or before. For instance, someone once asked Queen Elizabeth II, who died a while back, what she thought about capitalism and socialism. And she said, well, we're older than both, meaning that she represented a ruling class faction that was so old and so well established that it predated modern economic systems. Right? That's the
The
very
third
old
system.
part. All right. Then, so someone like the House of Windsor or the Saxe-Coburg Gotha dynasty that Queen Elizabeth represented, all right, that's very old money. Then you have old money, and that's like the Rockefeller, Carnegie, Hunt, Mellon, Ford, all of that kind of
House of
stuff. And all
Saud.
of that's, what's that?
House of Saud.
Yeah, that comes a little bit later, but yeah, that's within that standard. That's within that wider industrial paradigm.
Yeah, because they were big oil fucks.
Yeah. The and all of that stuff is still around too. For instance, if you look at some of the NGOs and foundations and philanthropies that tend to fund a lot of Democratic Party interest in the United States, a lot of those are connected to these old money families. If you look at if you trace a lot of the funding of a lot of these things, trace the funding networks, you see a lot of that comes from the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Gates Foundation. That's sort of an add-on. Gates is more of a tech oligarch than an industrial oligarch.
Yeah, they're modern DLC.
Right, and then and you have that in the United States. You have that on the Republican side. A good example are the Kochs. The Kochs are well-known oligarchs within on the Republican side of the spectrum. They represent Sunbelt capital, whereas someone like the Rockefellers represents the traditional ruling class, the Northeastern establishment. But if you look at how the Kochs generated a lot of their money, they did it in large part through partnership with the Soviet Union
or Nazis.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole lot of American ruling class interest that can be attached to that.
Oh, but by the way, I just real quick, I have this article on Free Thought Project. People should read that. Keith reposted it to attack the system. And it's an article called 3 Things the U.S. government does not want you to know about Nazis. And I've been told that it's triggering, it's fake news, it's deeply unsettling, it's evil. I've been told all of these things very recently. So if y'all want to go check that out, you can feel free to do so. I'm Satan himself. Keith.
Yeah. So these guys are fulfilling the same role as the robber barons. Like Musk is the new John D. Rockefeller. I mean, John D. Rockefeller at his time was sort of a pioneer industrialist. He represented the apex of industrial capitalism as it was at the time.
Right.
That's who Musk is today. He's sort of the apex of of digital capitalism as it's evolved so far. He's the richest man in the world, just like John D. Rockefeller was the richest man in the world at his time. And then you have these other, old tech oligarchs, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Gates, a number of others. And they play the same economic role, the same social role, the same political role. Like nowadays, these industrial elites, industrial bourgeois elites, like the Rockefeller types, they've become almost like the old aristocracy. They're like almost like old money now. They're not as old as say the House of Windsor, the Saxe-Coburg dynasty, or even the Rothschilds or any of that. But they represent that transition from the traditional pre-modern elite to the modern industrial capitalist elite. But now, in comparison, they're more like an aristocracy. Now, what you see is these industrial oligarchs becoming the new robber barons or the neo bourgeoisie or whatever, and they make their wealth. They generate their wealth in exactly the same ways. I mean, they do it through collusion, through monopoly and oligopoly, through state-centric practices,
regulatory capture,
exploitation of labor. All of the same criticisms that were voiced against the robber barons could be voiced against the tech oligarchs today. That doesn't mean the tech oligarchs have never contributed anything of value at all. I mean, I would say that industrial development in the 19th century, I'm not an anarcho-primitivist, so I would say it was a net positive. I mean, I'd say industrial development was a net positive. If you look at charts of world progress, and you see that humanity was almost static going back to the ancient civilizations like Sumeria and Babylon. And then you see this great leap forward in the 19th century where life expectancy, literacy, health standards, reduction of childhood diseases, reduction of infant mortality, all of that stuff starts to dramatically improve in the 19th and 20th century. And industrialization was a core reason for that. So it's not like industrial oligarchs never made any positive contributions at all. But you also had all these negatives associated with industrialization. And the same thing is true now. I mean, if it weren't for the digital capitalist revolution, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now because the technology for it wouldn't be available.
Well, same time, if we didn't have all that stuff to have this conversation, Japan wouldn't have been nuked, and there wouldn't have been the Exxon Valdez or the Texaco genocide. There's a lot of it's a trade-off.
You're right. That's exactly my point. I mean, with all of this progress comes a lot of negative side effects. It's just like a lot of treatments for a lot of diseases have terrible side effects. You can argue the treatment is a net positive compared to the disease itself, or maybe not. But but that's the effect that all of these social changes and technological changes have had, and that's where we are now. I mean, we're in a new Gilded Age. I mean, if you go back and you read about the Gilded Age of the late 19th century in the United States and Britain and elsewhere, you see that it's virtually identical in many ways to where the United States is today, or where maybe the more developed countries are today. The ones where the digital revolution have taken the deepest root, in the sense that in the 19th century you had the rise of what they called it free trade, but it just meant international trade. But prior to that, trade had been largely contained within national borders. I mean, you had mercantilism and all that, but you had the rise of international trade in the 19th century. You had the rise of classical liberalism, where the old aristocracies and monarchies started losing power. This new industrial bourgeois class started to become more influential. You had the breakdown of the power of the clergy, and all of that, secularization. And then you also had
Nietzsche.
You had there's a lot with him, but
I like him a lot because we vibe on the same schizo level. Anybody who wants to read Nietzsche should, because you'll get a taste of the conversation in here.
I'm beyond good news, but I have a question about
Nietzsche. If you go to my website, attackthesystem.com, and just in the search engine, just say Nietzsche, you'll find a lot of stuff on Nietzsche that I've written, and also stuff by others that's fairly interesting.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
But we're in the new Gilded Age, and not just in the technological. The analogy doesn't work. Works not only for the technology and economic conditions, but also the cultural and social conditions. The 19th century was a time of very, very rapid social and cultural change. For instance, to a large degree, slavery, as openly practiced, was abolished worldwide in the 19th century. I mean, it still continued. It still exists in certain forms today in certain places, but you had a reduction in slavery. The status of women in society rose significantly in many parts of the world, particularly in the developed world, or the industrialized world in the 19th century. The status of children actually started to rise. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, the only possible reason to have children was to carry on your family lineage, and also your children were your workforce. You wanted to have lots of kids go work in the fields, and also about half of children would not make it to adulthood in terms of life expectancy. So the status of children was much, much lower. And that continued on into the Industrial Revolution. As we know, we had, in the Industrial Revolution, you had eight-year-olds working in coal mines and that kind of stuff. But along the way, there was a rising interest in improving the conditions of children. And the status of children became much, much higher throughout the 19th and 20th century compared to what it had previously been. And that, there's lots of other things too. So we see that a lot of the same kinds of social changes and cultural changes going on today. For instance, nowadays, the LGBTQ rights issue is a mainstream issue. Whereas when I was younger, I'm almost 60, when I was, say, a kid, a child, it was virtually unheard of. It was a fringe cause. I mean, and very unpopular. Like if you took a poll today and asked Americans how many of them thought gay marriage was a good thing, probably 2/3 would say yes. Whereas 50 years ago, probably a negative number would have registered. It's and this has happened in a very short period of time. And there's also pushback against that, obviously. In the 19th century, you saw pushback against the Enlightenment, like during the post-Napoleonic era, in the post-1848 era, and the rise of authoritarian nationalism in the late 19th century with Bismarck and figures like that. Obviously we saw that in the 20th century with fascism. And we're seeing elements of that today as well. We're seeing this kind of nationalist authoritarian rising worldwide in sectors. And what they're doing is they're pushing back against the modern version of the Enlightenment. Like you could say that the post 1968 world is the Enlightenment part two. In the 18th century, the late 18th century, we had the Enlightenment, the power of the absolute monarchs, the traditional aristocrats, the established churches started to break down. In the late 20th century, you started to see an expansion of some of those ideas, where it's more about raising the status of, say, ethnic minorities or women or gay people or the environment or a lot of other things like that. Vietnam War, opposition to imperialist war, and a lot of the upheavals that happened, say, in the 1960s and 70s are sort of like a continuation of the legacy of the Enlightenment. And then there's a pushback going on against that right now as well. We see a lot of the things we see in this MAGA movement are well within American traditions. You see, like you have this know-nothing nativism, which the anti-immigration people that are very similar to the know-nothings of the early 19th century, or you see that was a real movement. It was called the know-nothing.
Right.
And they were an anti-immigration nativist movement. Then there was. You also see the paranoid style conspiracism, that you see in that's a lengthy tradition of that in American culture. You also see this kind of low church evangelicalism. If you look at American history, you've had these great awakenings, the first Great Awakening, the second Great Awakening. I think we could say starting in the 70s, we probably had a fourth Great Awakening. And some of the evangelicalism that you see as part of this MAGA stuff is sort of in that tradition. So all of this
evangelical.
Can I ask a question,
They're not
though?
preaching evangelion, so
Okay.
the evangel anyway.
Well, here's the thing I want to know, especially with my background behind me and what I've been studying, because I was ANCAP man and ANCAP stand for a long time. And if you had asked me a few years, like, yeah, cool, okay, Elon, woo, Bezos, he's a cool dude, they invent stuff. But the more and more I think about it, the more and more, like, all these people say, well, Kareem, I get you don't like Bill Gates because he did all these evil things, but you're using Windows, right? Don't you like that? Oh, I get you get an Amazon package once in a while, but, Bezos has contracts with them. Sam Altman is another one. I really don't like Sam Altman. I'm not against AI, but I would take ChatGPT and decentralize it with different nodes. I don't think Jeremiah would agree with that either, but that's another discussion. But my thing is this. To look at it like a zero-sum game, and I can't invent a time machine, but what I would say is, given the ability to invent all these things, if you had workers doing it themselves, whether it's tech or whether it's industrial, couldn't they have come up with better solutions without the violence and the atrocities? And because they would all be kind of in it together, as opposed to, hey, I have to screw over Steve Jobs. Now I have to screw over IBM. Now I have to not allow my employees to go to the bathroom. That's another thing Bezos does that's insane. Or I don't know why Elon is against working from home. I work from home. I can pump out 20 crypto videos and do my work and then do other work. So my question is, couldn't Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring, all of these things, whether you agree with them or not, whether you like the technology or not, couldn't the atrocities have been stopped? And couldn't they, isn't it possible you could have got more innovation if you would have done one or two things? Done the agorist style with Conkin, which is kind of keeping it local and working. And that, to me, would be the closest thing to actual, what ANCAPs call free market capitalism, or just free markets. Or, if you don't want to do that, work yourself, like, there's a school of thought called cyber syndicalism that I like the idea. And this exists in crypto projects where someone will create a project, renounce ownership, say, hey, you get this token, I'll give you voting rights based on how you want to move this project forward. Basically, it's called a DAO, but basically it's an online co-op. Is it not possible that a lot of this stuff, like the bomb that dropped on Japan, all these things could have been avoided if we had followed these systems, and should we follow these systems, or at least try and re-implement them in a tech age going forward?
Yeah, this is getting very into Kevin Carson territory. Like, if you've ever read Kevin Carson,
I saw his response to Larkin Rose, and I used to be a big defender of, like, I'm like, Larkin Rose is right on everything. Then it had to be said, Chris actually brought up a thing that Kevin Carson hit Larkin with. It says, like, hey, you said, but Musk and all these people, you know, you're rich because these people are richer. He's like, but they got this wealth, and then from government type things, or slavery or whatever, and then reinvested it into capitalist corporations. Isn't that corporatist? And Larkin just, dictionary definition. I don't hate Larkin Rose. I think Larkin's a good dude. Overall, it's just, that's the question.
So, and real quick, just to, like, get this, like, somewhat on Elon specifically, Elon Musk recently, I posted about the leopards are eating their faces. There's there's a meme that's been going around for, like, matter of years now, and this meme is like the people who voted in the leopards eating people's faces party are now having their faces eaten by leopards. It's that mentality, and the kind of thing that I'm talking about is Elon Musk was an African migrant to America. He was not born here, and he was imported, using the right-wing language, on an H-1B visa. And part of his whole ramp-up to supporting Republicans this year, and to having the beliefs that he has, part of that ramp-up has been spreading paranoia, panic, hysteria on migration. For instance, he posted an image, a video of this, like, anti-poverty march, and it was like Exodo de la Pobreza, if I remember correctly, and it was like, basically these people were threatening to leave Mexico, and also all these other countries that this caravan had come from, and go to America if like the conditions did not improve in their home country. If they were not given ways that they could escape poverty, they would escape the poverty by escaping the poverty-stricken country and go to another one. Now, they never made it to America. And Elon Musk and a bunch of other right-wingers pretended that they were already here, and that this was a flood of migrants, and they kept on posting pictures of it. But what actually happened was they stopped the flow of migration before it even got there, and Mexico gave them a bunch of jobs. They hooked them up with a bunch of private people. They also gave them some government positions, and a bunch of other shit like that happened. And suddenly...
Oh, so a happy ending.
Yeah, but Elon Musk tried to pretend, because it looked big and scary and brown, that, like, white people were being replaced, that America was being overrun by migrants, and a bunch of people believed that shit. He also constantly reposted bullshit immigration statistics from very biased people. I had an entire article that I was writing, but honestly it turned into a book, so I'm turning that into a book. And this latest Elon Musk garbage, where he's, like, complaining about the migration thing hitting him, now that it's hitting him, is exactly the evidence that we're talking about, because he specifically had people in previously his camp to respond to now, where he said, you know, oh yeah, H-1B, like, is the only reason I'm here, and I'm, you know, providing a shit ton of value to you, so, you know, fuck yourself in the face. So the audience he cultivated and the audience that he and Trump tried to use to say that, like, oh, there's a huge migration problem. Now that migration is being challenged on the grounds of people like him and his kind of visa, it's suddenly a bad thing to challenge. And so that's another example, I think, to bring up, because you brought up migration, Keith. Aaron, what is your response to that? Because Elon Musk is an anti-immigration person, and he's been very clear on that.
Yes.
So what's your take on him finally getting a taste of his own medicine?
Yeah, you brought up a great point. I'm not, first off, I'm being an ANCAP, I'm more of an open borders kind of guy. Elon definitely stoked the fears of immigration, and he seemed to have had at the moment, and it seems like a kind of like a battle of convenience for him. He focused on the whole unregulated immigration, illegal immigration, people jumping over the borders, and then the Democrats using them to illegally vote. And I thought this was all kind of just scare tactic nonsense myself. He used that to his advantage, supporting Trump. Now that Trump's elected, he does an about-faced, I'm pro V1 and go fuck yourself in the face. I like the fact that he turned around and kind of showed what I always thought were his true colors, which are pro-immigration. He seems to be focused more on the whole, I like skilled immigration rather than unregulated, unskilled immigration. That seems to be what his thing is. I don't think, Jeremiah, I see like a racial component to, like, he kept all the brown guys at X, and he's very, his companies are just full of people from all over the world. So I don't feel on the racial thing, but I definitely feel that he stoked the fears and gave red meat to racists. And now there's this big schism that's opening that I thought was a long time coming. And I'm kind of glad that it happened, because I don't want to see the racist nationalist types try to glom on to a tech bro or the pro tech Elon Musk and, Apple computers kind of like crowd. So it was pretty ridiculous, honestly. It was a convenience thing that Elon played up. It is kind of coming around to bite him in the ass a little bit, and he's getting hit a lot by the far right and the nationalists. But I'm kind of glad that that is being like the sunlight's hitting it. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that he's actually decided to at least be a little more pro-immigration, honestly.
So, like, when it comes to it, what I'm talking about, even recently, what he did was he said, like, AFD is the only AFD can save Germany, and he said that because of a post from this person talking about, like, like, if I understand correctly, how Elon Musk and Javier Milei and all of this stuff is in line with AFD, and AFD is the only thing in Germany that, like, is willing to support his policies. Meanwhile, AFD is a massively anti-immigration party. And he said, and he endorsed that, and they're also racists who have had weird relationships with Nazis. I mean, weird in terms of, like, unsettling, but not weird for them, because it's a routine thing for them. And I don't think he didn't know that. I think he knows who he keeps courting, and I think he courts them on purpose.
I feel like it's unsavory. I kind of agree with you about the AFD thing. I think that he's trying to push, again, use for convenience, like he did with MAGA, a party that I think is a little more unsavory than MAGA, but they've got big number. Like they're like the second most popular party, for better or for worse, in Germany. I'm sorry that happened. It seems like the only reason AFD is popular is because of the complete inability of the left-wing parties in power or center-left parties in power to deal with the concerns that these people are having about crime and immigration, which I think are overblown. But it's obvious that Elon wants to bring AFD to power to benefit him and his presence with his companies in Europe. And I wouldn't be surprised if he changes tune a little bit if they ended up getting in power, but I don't really want to see them in power. I don't really want to defend the AFD thing. I think he's also using them like pawns, like he did with MAGA, frankly, to help his interest in Europe. Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, you got to admit that after a certain amount of people are the people with whom you're aligning yourself, all while denigrating the other side completely and not supporting the left at all, when these people are the people he's courting, and when he also, for instance, courted Top Lobster, when he supported Mel Gibson, when he supported like all of these right wingers, when he like kept like left wingers like Reverb banned from Twitter, along with a whole bunch of like libertarian accounts, like for instance the original Free Thought Project account, the original Police the Police. A lot of like libertarian classic accounts are still banned from Twitter. But who did he reinvite? Alex Jones, Andrew Anglin, Nick Fuentes, Kanye West, and a bunch of these other people who are directly responsible for spreading this sort of thing. I just can't help but think that he's going for a very specific kind of thing, and that he doesn't actually have principles in the anti-racist department, because he would rather court those sorts of people than he would like understand that real coalition work for a real libertarian future involves everyone. Because like if he truly didn't like racism, don't you think he would stop working with racists?
Well, I can give you my take on that.
Go for it.
All right. Well, first of all, if we look at Elon Musk's background, he is from South Africa. Let's see, I'm not sure. How old is he? Is he like in his late 40s, maybe?
Whatever he is, he's dissolving. You can see his shirtless pictures. Like if you look at one of his shirtless pictures, you'll just see somebody turning into Jello. It's very disgusting. Go ahead, though.
He was born in apartheid South Africa. Also, his family owned emerald mines in Zambia, which is a former British colony. So his family wealth was generated, through this kind of colonialist apartheid type of system, and that's how he started life. So it's important to understand the foundation on which he got started. He's not some guy who was born into poverty and pulled himself up by the bootstraps, and the way that kind of mythology tends to work. All right, but as far as Elon's political affiliation, at one point he was considered to be something of a liberal because he was, promoting green technology and that kind of stuff. But what I've noticed in recent times is I've seen a shift of strategy among a lot of ruling class sectors, and of which Elon is a prominent representative. It seemed to me that during the period between, say, when Obama was elected up until about a little over a year and a half ago, I'm going to try and not make this too wordy. As an example, in American politics, the partisan cycles tend to run about every 35 or 40 years. So the Republicans were the dominant party from roughly the late 60s up through 2008. Right? What happened in the 2000s is that the George W. Bush regime was so incompetent that it created an opening for the liberal wing of the ruling class, which is the northeastern wing, to make a comeback with Obama as their front man. And there were other things that contributed to that, like social changes and demographic changes and all of that. So for a time, the liberal wing of the ruling class tended to be dominant from the late 2000s up until right about now. And in fact, we saw the liberal wing of the ruling class trying to co-opt and weaponize a lot of things, like Occupy, for example. They tried to co-opt that. They tried to co-opt the BLM uprising in 2020. But I think during the Biden era, a lot of ruling class interests decided that wasn't really working for them anymore. For example, there are certain things on the political left, that the ruling class obviously can't co-opt. They can't co-opt outright socialism or communism. They can't co-opt things that directly threaten state security, like abolishing the police. So I think there was something of a effort by a lot of ruling class interests to pull back from that during the Biden era. Plus, the Biden administration was obviously such a joke. I think it lost legitimacy, and that started motivating a lot of ruling class interests to lean more towards the right. And I think a key critical event was the October 7th and the the war in Gaza. I think you saw a lot of the Zionist elite in particular lurching rightward
Right.
and trying.
Though to be clear, let's just call it a genocide because it's barely a war if there's like
Oh
this
yeah,
much
I mean
one-sidedness.
that's obvious. Yeah, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
But so during that time period, I think we started to see a general shift in ruling class strategy where they're pulling away from trying to, work the liberal angle and move more rightward on a more general level. I think we saw the Zionist elite lurching rightward to try to weaponize various things against the pro-Palestine movement. They were trying to weaponize anti-woke. There's liberal anti-woke, there's conservative anti-woke, there's this cultural Christianity stuff. Like I noticed almost on cue, a lot of influencers from the right started promoting themselves as cultural Christians. Cultural Christian cultural Christian basically means an atheist who's Islamophobic. Like the Trigonometry YouTube channel.
Jordan Peterson,
Lindsay,
Russell Brand.
Ion Harsali, those are all good examples of this. So we have this general right lurch by the ruling class. We have this rightward lurch by the Zionist elite, and also the tech oligarchs. The more powerful and influential they become, as I said earlier in the program, we've seen the tech oligarchs, I think, split into a lot of different factions. You see a more right-wing faction, a more liberal faction, a more centrist faction. And Musk is one of the guys that has thrown in his lot with the right now. He's basically decided that for whatever reason, the right is something that he can use more effectively than either liberals or the left or the center or whatever. So he's thrown in his lot with Trumpism and MAGAism, essentially becoming the sugar daddy for a lot of that kind of stuff. And of course, Musk is so wealthy and influential that he's trying to do this on an international level, not just in the United States, but he's also trying to get behind AFD. At one point, he was smoozing with Maloney in Italy. In fact, some people were even speculating Georgia Maloney was his new girlfriend. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like that's what Musk is trying to do now. He's trying to weaponize this kind of populist, nationalist right wing as a tool that he can use for whatever reasons. I think he has a grudge against the cultural left because he has a trans woman daughter, so I think he's got issues with that. That seems to be one thing that motivates Musk personally, but it seems like to me Musk is just trying to weaponize the populist or nationalist right towards his own ends. He's trying to create a fake populism where populism has nothing to do with class interest. It's just all about being anti-woke and owning the libs and that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's a place. So I'm gonna just step in here and say like probably a minute and a half, 2 minute stuff, and then I'll throw it to Kareem for a moment here because I think he had something you want to say. But the general gist, I don't think there's even been a rightward lurch. I think things have always generally served the right and their interests, and that the left has I'm sort of a Konkinian in that way, but like not quite matching his template. I think that the general gist is that the right has been the ones in power. They're the ones with the money. They're the ones that advance capitalism. They're the ones that advance monarchy. They're the ones that say we have to return to a time that it's better and make it great again because they pretend that it was awesome once and that it could be made that way again. I think that those sorts of people are always the right, and that the general thing is that the more leftist kind of things are aesthetic. Like they don't actually it's still capitalism for a very profitable drone to shoot a drone missile, even if it's has a pride flag on it. It's still very the same kinds of politics for the CIA to destabilize and do regime change in another country if a black lesbian is in charge of the unit that does it. It doesn't matter that they're represented. It doesn't matter that they're doing DEI or whatever. What matters is the practical conclusions, and the practical conclusions are always that the general gist moving forward is the same gist that always existed. It's the same sorts of capital conditions on the ground. It's the same material conditions, the same dialectics, the same shit that's always been. It's just got maybe different gift wrapping on the shit gift. So like I personally believe that this is very much like all the right wing's been in charge. And if they ever give people like a seat at the table in terms of representation, it's only so that they can say, see, we're not doing the complete evil. We allow you to do some good. And it's just enough of a pressure release for the common person. And it gives them hope in the system. It gives them hope that they can accomplish something without any revolution or significant insurrection. Because, oh, well, we can just use the system works. Probably not. The system doesn't do a whole great good job of fucking working for the common person, and it never really has. So now the right, using this sort of populist lens, they're using it because it's been proven to work, but they're using the surface level of it. They're not actually willing to go whole hog and be the people's people. They're still doing what they're doing, and they're still doing what they always did. As far as I'm concerned, it's still the same framework. And so, since it's the same framework, I'm not going to say it's a different side. It's the same side, it's just different packaging, as far as I'm concerned. So, you can respond for a short bit, and then, we'll throw it to Kareem, who probably has a lot to say.
Yeah, well, I generally agree with that. Yeah. I do think that the ruling class is splintered into different factions. I don't think it's a monolith. I do think they're ruling class. I mean, you could say it's also layered. The ruling classes are layered. There's a hierarchy within the ruling class, just like there is within the wider society. And then it's also different factional interests, and that they have different strategies and approaches, in terms of self-empowerment and that kind of thing. But the analogy I like to use is to the Middle Ages. Like if you look at the structure of the societies of the Middle Ages, like in medieval Europe, and other parts of the world that had similar systems.
Yeah.
You see that, okay, what was the ruling class in medieval Europe? You had the royal dynasties, you had the hereditary titled aristocracies, and then that tended to be layered. The nobility was layered, based on the size of land you had control over and particular titles, and you had like the aristocracy. Then underneath that, you had the gentry that are like the non-titled big landholders, and then you also had the clerisy, the church, the religious and cultural leaders. And then you had the king, the military, the king's knights, and all of that kind of stuff. And you have parallels to that in modern societies as well. I mean, we have the state itself, the political institutions, where like in the United States, the president is kind of like an elected monarch, and then you have the bureaucracy that's like all the king's ministries, and then you have the military that's like the king's knights, and then you have the corporate elite and financial institutions. They're kind of like the aristocracy, and then that's layered into the most powerful ones and the richest ones and more intermediary ones, and then more localized ones and all of that. And then you also have the cultural institutions, and we still have the church, and then I think that the educational system and the media and all of that in part functions as a modern type of church. It's like like you could say that the modern church is the church. We still have the church, but we also have we have religious broadcasting and all that kind of stuff. But then we also have an ostensibly secular church, which is education.
The religion of statism.
The religion of the state, exactly. And there's certainly within medieval societies, you had plenty of rivalries within the ruling class. I mean, you had members of royal dynasties that would bump each other off, in mafia-like assassinations, and the Medici were famous for that stuff. But they still had a united ruling class front against the peasants. And then there were elements within the medieval ruling class that would pretend to be friends of the peasants. Oh, we're the good guy aristocrats. We're the good guy feudal lord. I'm the good guy monarch. I want to help the peasants. And you had a lot of common people that actually believed that. Like in Russia, for instance, when Tsar Nicholas I was assassinated. I think, was it Nicholas I, Alexander I, one of them. There were peasants that objected to that, thinking, oh no, the Tsar, he's the guy that was going to save us from the lords, from serfdom. He was going to rescue us from serfdom. It's like Jesus or something.
Like Trump with his little ear nick.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's how a lot of these MAGA types view Trump. And there are Democrats that have the same view of somebody like Obama. It's
or Kennedy.
So, Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, the Kennedys epitomize the traditional aristocratic practice of trying to pretend like you're a friend of the peasants.
Yeah,
They
and
always
Robert F. Kennedy is the newest one in that cunt class.
right. Well, the Kennedys always made a big show of how liberal they were and how much a friend of the common people they were. I mean, they were really just gangsters, but that all of these things that we see going on today have plenty of prototypes and parallels from very old societies as well. So yeah, but yeah, if you define the left as the opposition to the ruling class, then yeah, none of this stuff is left. It's even the most quote unquote liberal medieval monarch or feudal lord or cleric was not a leftist. I mean, not even by the standards of the time, not even by the standards of the levelers or the diggers or brethren of the free spirit or some of that, or even maybe even Thomas More's Utopia. So
and even in like the modern day, like people like to pretend that the Democrats are super lefty. No, they aren't. Kamala Harris is a cunt. Kamala Harris, Biden, those people serve the oligarchy, the aristocracy, just as much as anybody else does. And like Kamala, holy shit, look, I am anti-Trump as it comes, and one of the reasons is because he sexualized his daughter, and because he was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He said that he was a lot of fun to be with, and that he had similar tastes in beautiful young women, which is not good. That stuff's not great. But you know what? Kamala Harris, when she was like top cop in California, helped cover up local church sex crimes. She like had the files. She could have done something about it, and she kept it covered up. And she did that so that she could keep her power and not be challenged by the church, which is still an objectively powerful organization. She thought it would threaten her like toe into politics. She's always been a conniving little power seething little bitch. And like that's the thing about her, is that when she was top cop, she was doing it so that she could enslave
she grew
people.
Up in a middle class family, man.
Yeah, right? Yeah,
she's class.
She used to work at McDonald's by being the person who drove by there on her way to do other things. So
to arrest marijuana smokers.
Exactly. So and that's the thing. She kept a lot of people enslaved, and she represents what a lot of this is. It's just aesthetics. It's just like it's the aesthetics of being on the side of the people because I'm not Trump. Well, you're Trump in many of the ways that matter, and in the other ways it's just aesthetic differences because you're still fucking the same kind of tyrant that you claim to oppose. And then these it's funny because like everybody's like, oh, Trump migration, and yeah, cool, yeah, sure, open borders, no borders might be a better arrangement for libertarian mentalities, but like at the same time, Kamala's the one who said do not come. There were more kids in cages under Biden than there were under Trump. And Obama was the drone king helping spread U.S. imperialism around the world. Now, the fact that Trump came in and started breaking those records and eventually, like, removed his mandate, like Obama's mandate to, like, report your locations and amounts is certainly an issue. And, like, that makes Trump the new drone king. But at the same time, or maybe even Biden, because he didn't put that shit back. But all of this just proves that they're all on the same fundamental side. None of them are very different. And like it's things like that, and it's things like the vaccine immunity. Like everybody like tries to pretend that they're anti-Bush now because George W. Bush was bad, and now we've had a long enough time to say that George W. Bush was bad. But he put the PACT Act, I believe is what it was called, in place where it would like indemnify vaccine manufacturers in the case of a stated emergency. And now Trump like was the first person during the COVID stuff to enact PACT Act lockdowns and prevent the vaccine manufacturers from being held liable. He was the first person to activate that shit, and Biden kept it activated, and it's all one big club and we ain't in it.
Yeah, well, Harris and Obama are part of the same political machine that took over the Democratic Party in roughly the late 2000s. But that she built her career by aligning herself with the tech elite in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. But then that in turn is connected to this kind of old moneyed Northeastern establishment I was talking about earlier.
Anglo-American Establishment is a great book.
Yeah. I mean, Obama and Harris are fronts for those people, basically. Yeah, as for Trump, I mean, I've been familiar with him since the 80s. I mean, he's always been an all-purposes scumbag. It's like I've never had any illusions about that guy at all. I mean, politically, he's basically like Alex Jones meets Joel Osteen. He's just this cult leader that just promotes all sorts of outrageous nonsense, and then he's got this, foolish following that believes anything he says.
Yeah, so Kareem, it's been a bit since you've spoken. Real quick, just gonna say to every single person in the chat, I need you to send this to one group message you're in. It doesn't matter to me if you're against what we're saying, as long as you're here. Feel free to send this to as many group chats as you're in. Whoever's in those group chats, just send it out. Get the hate in here. Kareem, go for it.
All right, a lot of stuff to unpack there. First of all, if we're going to talk about this, I think it's split into factions. Like James Lindsay was crying about the woke right, the woke right. First he was screaming communism, which he didn't know what communism is. But and I find it interesting. To me, I think what the elite do, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the ruling class actually, to my knowledge, along with Engels, funded Marx to be the dominant thinker. And to me, Marx basically, for lack of a better word, came up with some, you can even say good ideas, but a lot of stuff he copy and pasted from Louis Blanc. That quote wasn't his, from Ichigo. And also the fact is nobody ever mentions Bakunin and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting to me when people criticize communism, they criticize Marx. It's like, okay, yeah, that's the worst version of it. There's council, there's this, there's Bakunin's out, there's anarcho-collectivism. So at least look at the whole thing and then I wouldn't preface by saying, okay, Konkin's bad because corporatism exists. It'd be a stretch. That's one thing I think that's interesting. So people jumped into factions. As far as like Musk and all these people, it's very clear to me, Trump and all, that what they're doing is just trying to, like what one of my friends said, oh, okay, Democrats like billionaires because billionaires will, get, Democrats will give them all the regulatory capture and all this stuff like that. But it seems now that Republicans are in power, oh, Zuckerberg wants to help, oh, Musk wants to be friends, Bezos wants to.
Exactly.
Like these people are just, it's just who's the popular kid in school?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this team won. Hey, I'm on this team. Like, it was kind of funny. Like, all the Saudi princes are like, we don't like Trump, blah, 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 blah. Oh, he won. No, let's talk. So these people just drop on a dime. Whoever wins or who's ever in power, supposed power, I should say, now they want to be friends with. But you know who doesn't care? You know who said he didn't care? Which to me is interesting. I don't know what class you rank him in. He's definitely above Musk and the rest of them. And even like Patrick Bet-David, which I disagree with, he goes weird on Israel. He's okay. And so, but to me, Larry Fink said, I don't care. I don't care if it's Trump or Kamala. Because I own indexes and everything. I own more Bitcoin. I think he owns more Bitcoin than Satoshi Nakamoto, which is messed up. And this is to me really where I agree with it had to be said, Chris, like how are you gonna, what bootstraps can you pick up to get $11 trillion in holdings without stealing it?
Mm-hmm.
And they probably own the boot companies and the straps and the manufacturers and the horse stables and everything.
Right.
You can't win. So
yeah,
as much as I could say, yeah, Elon Musk is just playing to the tune, there's people, I think, in a level like Larry Fink who don't care. Who the CEO of BlackRock, who's like, yeah, we just manage it. No, you don't. Like, you own, like when George Carlin said you have owners, they own you. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. I agree with that. Metaphorically speaking, I don't know if there's any proof to that, but it was a really good skit.
Oh, there's plenty of proof.
And then I was like, wait, George Carlin, that wasn't really like a ha-ha funny skit. Like, you have owners. They own you. They own everything. So I think Musk is, I agree with people, Musk, Bill Gates, and all these people. They're in the, like, middle tier of the ruling class where they want to be friends with the guy who's in power because they know that there's another guy in power who's really calling the shots. And I'm sure there's people over Larry Fink telling him what to do. I would imagine it's very powerful families, which I don't want to get into, but there's a lot of Tuscan families and Columna family and Farnese and and those other families too that I think really call the shots. You can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Well, also like the Vatican, the House of Saud, the Russian oligarchs, the Chinese long dynasties coming down to like the servants of Xi. Like there's a significant block of just older money that funds the middle money that Keith was talking about, and that like it's an incestuous relationship between those two to build the new money, because the new money has to serve the new form of empire, and that's why they don't have a problem with us like criticizing the old empires or saying that they're collapsing and dying and shit, because ultimately that's necessary for the transition period. It's like burning down like a part of the forest so that you can build a building where it was.
So you can say Musk is bad, but I think Musk is still controlled by like the higher echelons of whatever you want to call it. Yeah, the Al Saud, the UAE, people like that. They got like the real ridiculous. And I do believe there are trillionaires who, you can buy. The Waltons are another one. The Waltons are more powerful than Musk. I'm sure people like the Collins family, the Rockefellers, the Waltons. Right. Larry Fink, they probably say, Musk, Trump, this is what you do. You do what we tell you to do, and then you pretend. Hey, even the Adelson family, West.
Yep.
You do what we want you to do. Musk, you do what we want you to do, and then you get to have your space company, and you get to have.
It's like Thomas Massey says, everybody's got an APAC guy.
Yeah, but he's got a ruling class guy.
There's a lot we could do with this, because that's an important point. The someone like Elon Musk within the ranks of the ruling class is really more like you could say they're the upper middle class, in the sense that if you want to describe what the upper middle class is, the lower upper middle class would be people who have a six-figure income. Somebody that makes on the low end, $200,000 a year, on the high end, $800,000 or $900,000 a year. The middle upper middle class would be millionaires, people who have, and I define a true millionaire as somebody who makes $1 million a year, not somebody whose entire net worth is worth $1 million. And then the upper middle class would be these billionaire oligarchs. The famous rich. That would be Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Oprah Winfrey, Mark Cuban, the famous rich. But above that,
the glitterati that like Marilyn Manson would call them.
Right. Above that is the true ruling class, and the true ruling class are those people whose wealth and power is not measured in personal assets. And here's an example, like Nelson Rockefeller, when he was appointed vice president in 1974, when Nixon resigned and Gerald Ford took over as president, and then Ford appointed Nelson Rockefeller. So Nelson Rockefeller essentially owned the Republican Party in the 70s. But Nelson Rockefeller was appointed vice president, and then he had to be confirmed by Congress. And then in the congressional hearings, they were asking about his relationship to the Chase Manhattan Bank. And Nelson Rockefeller said, truthfully, he said, I do not own a single share in the Chase Manhattan Bank. And that was technically true. And the reason why is he owned the whole bank. He wasn't a shareholder. Shareholders were his customers. He owned the bank. And that's what the true ruling class is. These people's wealth and influence is not measured in personal wealth. It's all tied up in these organizational trusts and that kind of stuff. The House of Saud that you mentioned earlier is another good example. They're clearly trillionaires. They are an old school royal dynasty. that are worth trillions of dollars. And I would argue that the old moneyed royal and elite families of Europe that are part of the Saxe-Coburg Gotha dynasties, which the Windsors from England are part of. That's the King Charles and the late Queen Elizabeth II and Lady Di and all of that. That's another example of that. That these are people that are so rich, that you can't even count their money. They're beyond rich. This true ruling class tends to remain more invisible. They tend to like to, they're the ones that live behind the gated mansions with armies of servants, but nobody else ever sees them. It's like when you do have some that cultivate a celebrity status with themselves, like the Windsors, but that's not really the norm.
Do you listen to Immortal Technique at all?
No, I've never heard of that.
I think you might like Immortal Technique. He's a rapper. And he had this great song that I think you would vibe with. It's called Rich Man's World. It's from his heavily sampled free album, The Martyr. So you can get this legally free. Like, you don't even have to pirate it. You just go to Viper Records and, like, pay what you want. And there's a line in this that I think would vibe with you. I'll invest money from Al-Qaeda in the bank 9/11 widows go to later. Capitalism's who I pray to, fuck the state of the world. Money talks, so what the fuck I need to say to your girl. I don't pay them to fuck, I pay them to leave.
Yeah, that's about how it works. Well, Larry, I love you mentioned Larry.
There's a law if you can't rewrite it.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a great fucking song.
Yeah, Kareem mentioned Larry Fink. Larry Fink is a front man. Like Larry Fink represents the managerial elite, which is like part of the upper strata of the capitalist class, but it's the people behind him who matter. He's become as influential as he is by managing other people's money. So he's part of this kind of managerial oligarchy that we also saw emerge in the 20th century as part of the latter stage of the Industrial Revolution. But it's the people behind him that are important. But yeah, at that level, if you're somebody like Larry Fink, where you're fronting like for that. People that have trillions of dollars, then you don't need to care who the president of the United States is. That's because they're gonna do what you want regardless. And I actually have a video. I put it in the chat here. I don't know if the viewers can see it or not, but I have a video from a talk I gave at a conference in Portugal earlier this year, where I discussed my approach to political economy with an anarchist spin on it. I mean, most of what I'm presenting is mainstream academic work. Plus, I have an additional anarchist ideological critique, and then I throw in some other stuff that's more from the margins, but I think it's legitimate. But in that, I try to outline who the ruling class is on an international level and how the different factions and how they're layered. I mean, on an international level, the CCP, the Communist Party of China, is they're like the BlackRock of China. They're part of the global ruling class. Some of these autocrats like Putin and Erdogan and people like that, they're part of the global ruling class. The House of Saud, the Al Sabah dynasty in Kuwait, these are all part of that as well. And then you've got most of us are more familiar with the Western version of this, which is that is old money, the Saxe-Coburg Gotha dynasties, the Rothschilds, and then it's got the leftover industrial oligarch money, the Rockefeller and Morgan and Carnegie and Kennedy, and then you've got the new oligarchs, the tech oligarchs, and then the financial oligarchs, the Warren Buffetts, and then you got the organizations behind that, like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and all of that.
Yeah, BlackRock and its totally different and completely materially separate counterpart, Blackstone. All of these, just distinct organizations with similar names, totally not a part of the same plan. Yeah, and actually it's fun because I think it's either one or the other, but the person in charge of the other, they're closely related. And then when asked about what the difference was, the person in charge of one said the other one can do what we can, does what we can, but they're less reserved about it. They're more in the open about it, and it's just like the same shit. It's all the same shit.
I'm going to go conspiracy theory on Jeremy. No, I'm not going to bring up lizard people because he's going to give me a hard time for that, David Icke. But I actually went down. I used to think, okay, well, the Rothschilds control. When I was like 21, 22, like the Rothschilds control everything, and I'm like, no, I don't really believe that because that's kind of like a dumb. It's not a smart look at it, or like that. It's like the Freemason. But I even looked. I'm like, there are the levels above this. And I started looking at like, okay, there's 12 families here, but there's families above them, and names kept coming up like Collins or Columna. These are actually like Vatican families,
Right.
like Nese.
The Vatican is the single largest property holder in New York. I had to say that.
Yeah, so like
the Vatican is very much part of the global ruling class.
Yeah.
Actually, in the talk I gave that I mentioned earlier, I actually mentioned them.
Yeah.
All like I said earlier, the ruling class is old money, very old money, and new money. You've got Musk and all that stuff, new money, but you've got very old money. You've got the Vatican as epitomizes that. That goes back to the Roman era. So all of that is still there. A lot of these old, medieval era, early modern era banking dynasties. The Rothschilds are the most famous one, but there's others as well. Those are all still there. All the royal families of Europe and aristocratic dynasties, they're all there. Now they've been eclipsed somewhat, or they've had to share space with the industrial bourgeoisie and then the digital bourgeoisie and all that. But all of that is still present.
Right, and so you were headed for a broader conspiracy, if I understand correctly. Great.
Yeah, well, there's other families that look like. I kept trying to like, is there a head? Is there a head of this? And one guy kept coming, Dominica. I cannot, but like that. I guess they were calling them the Maxima family, which is people were on top. So that would be like the Maxima themselves. Farnese was one that came up a lot. Collins, because this one guy said everybody says Rockefeller controls everything. It's actually the Collins family, the Knights of Columbus, Collins, Columna Pictures. I'm like, wait, why are all these things called Collins? So
Maxima is part of the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha dynasty. They're the Dutch. I'm not sure if they're Dutch in origin, but the current Queen of Holland, Queen Maxima, is one of them. That's why they call her Maxima.
Does that mean she's on top of anything, or she controls the rest of them, or is she just part of it?
Well, I think she personally married into it. She's more like Lady Di or something, But the Maxima connected sectors of the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha dynasty, they're like the Windsors. I mean, they're like they have the same status in some other European countries. But some of the names that you mentioned are old school Italian banking families. That's why they're connected to the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
They go back to the Middle Ages or maybe the Renaissance.
They say they go all the way back to like the ruling class of Babylon and Egypt, and some of these people do. Like they say in their bio. I haven't looked in that. I am going off conspiracy theory, but they say, hey, we go back to Nimrod or to this king or that, like literal statism back in antiquity.
I keep telling people this shit goes back millennia. Like, not just centuries, not even the past 50, 70, 100 years, it's millennia. We're dealing with thousands of years of corruption and long-kept secrets, burned books, smashed tablets, fucked up ruined cities. Like, this is not new.
Well, each new ruling class that emerges brings elements of what existed in the past with it, just like each new state that emerges brings elements of the past state. Like, if I look at the United States, I mean, it's easy to see the British influence on the United States, but it's also easy to see the Greco-Roman influence on the United States. I mean, just look at the architecture in D.C.
Yeah, Foskey's everywhere.
Yeah.
And like, we got somebody in chat who's a longtime sub, Liberimer, says, y'all know the Habsburgs are still around, LOL. They ruled the world on paper for at least 1,000 years.
Well, they were part of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And they're still out there.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a hard thing. Like, yeah, there are things there's a lot of stuff I don't like about Musk. The subsidies, the DARPA. I think he is just kind of the front man for a lot of their stuff for the MIC but I don't think he or Trump really controls anything. And the problem is, keep trying to tell people, and they're like, no, the problem I have is regular people think that Vivek and Trump and Elon and, you know, RFK and all these people, they're our saviors. It's better than Kamala. Well, at least it's better than Kamala or something like that. And it's like, okay, whatever. Like maybe in some very small ways, but it's still the ruling class. You know, it's like that cartoon. You saved me. I wouldn't say saved. More like under new management. And they're like, no, he's fighting the deep state. Like, no, he's not.
And like that.
Yeah, I'd say that's a really naive view of how the system works. I mean, it's like the only possible reason to favor one ruling class faction over another is say that, you know, there's some topical issue that you're more interested in, where one ruling class faction tends to be better, like say the abortion issue or the gun issue or LGBTQ rights. I mean, there are, you know, there's about 20% of issues where there are differences among different ruling class factions, largely because of the way the different ruling class factions work is they try to cultivate constituencies for themselves. It's just like medieval monarchs and aristocrats tried to, you know, would rally, you know, the peasants on their side against other monarchs or something. You know, okay, peasants, you know, it's this monarch over here. He's the one that's screwing you. Let's go get him. You know, it's and in the process, you know, you can have more land for personal farming or something. You know, it's so that kind of dynamic does work. And a lot of these topical issues are the way that or the bait they use for that now. You know, it's like abortion, gun control, gay rights, trans rights. You know, school prayer used to be a big one some years ago.
I didn't like any of that. The only thing I thought might have been good is when Sheldon Adelson gave Trump money to said like go to war with Iran, go to war. He's like, hey, we'll do. But how much problems will this cause? He's like, yeah, I don't want to do it. And they're like, what? I gave you this one, and then he was fighting with his generals. So the only thing I hope is Trump is again like, no, let's get Iran. Like, no, I want to fight with my generals. Fight. We'll do this and sanction this and that. Hopefully that causes some. Hopefully he's fighting with his generals the whole time again. That would be nice. That's the only good thing I can think. I can't see anything with Pete Hegseth getting or Mike Huckabee getting better.
And we'll be going over the entire cabinet again relatively soon. Like we did a first episode of that, and you're welcome to join us on the next episode of the cabinet thing. We'll be wrapping soon. We got like maybe I want to say like 18 minutes left. By the way, anybody in chat, feel free to subscribe. You're free to join, even if you don't agree with us, and let us know why we're wrong in the chat. But in the chat, Liberimer says, after the HRE was abolished, they got the Austrian crown until they were deposed in the aftermath of World War I following the assassination of Franz Ferdinand von Habsburg, and they still have immense property and influence after the war ended. Rome never fell. The seat of, I think it's Aeneas, and had always ruled the world. And we've also got Tyrantulus saying, like, I never got into it, but the Archduke's assassination always seemed to add deeper implications than just aggression from warfare. Rome shed her bloat and walked forward under new guise. I fully agree with that. But like, so I guess to bring it to a pseudo close, because first off, Aaron is expressing interest in doing a part 2. He's a family man, a dad, and he's got, you know, responsibilities, so he had to book. But we can be doing a part 2 to really hammer in some of the other stuff that was sort of missed about Elon Musk himself, and we will be, because there's a whole lot more. But additionally, the general thing that I want to make sure that we have established here. So, from your perspective, Keith, first off, how and I'll ask basically some wrap up questions here for both of you. From your perspective, how can people best oppose these people, and where should they go to start thinking about this from a more grandiose sort of rulership bloodline kind of mentality? You got like let's say 7 minutes to answer.
Well, in my case, I would say go to YouTube and Google a video of me speaking. This is from a talk I gave at an academic meeting in Portugal earlier this year. And it's called, just Google my name, Keith Preston, Anarchist Political Economy. This is a talk I gave to the Commonwealth of Free Spirits. And in that video is about 50 minutes long. And I outline a very comprehensive overview of, what constitutes states, ruling classes, empires, and power elites in the contemporary world. And I get into a lot of things that aren't typically covered in these discussions. I don't go into a lot of historical stuff, like trying to trace this back to the Roman Empire or whatever, but I do talk more about a lot of international stuff that typically gets ignored, like the House of Saud, like the Vatican, like the CCP, like the UAE. All of that is included in there. And I think that's a good something like, and then you can take what I discussed, and then you can run with it. You can go start looking for other information from other sources. In there I talk about the different kinds of conspiracy theories and what I think some of their weaknesses are. As well as I bring in a lot of mainstream academic analysis, stuff that would be perfectly acceptable in mainstream academia. But then I also bring in stuff from the margins that's more controversial and more anti-establishment, and sort of synthesize the two and say, well, this is where I think this is valid and this is not, and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's we're definitely, to have a good understanding of how the system works, you've got to understand all of this stuff. You've got to understand that the ruling class is still the ruling class. It's not like there are some Republicans who think the entirety of the ruling class is basically, CNN and the Democratic Party and Hollywood and the universities, and that's about it. And then there are people on the liberal side of the spectrum, or liberal or left side of the spectrum. They think the entire ruling class is Donald Trump, the Republican Party, Fox News, and the fossil fuel industry. No, I mean, ruling class is something that's infinitely more sophisticated than that, and it's worldwide, not just in the United States. It's like, and so, a lot of that information is out there. You just got to look for it.
Right. So, and Kareem, for you, I'm gonna say, from your perspective, you were talking about sort of decentralization. What would you advise people do? Because you say you're against Elon Musk. If they want to escape sort of his version of tech, his version of the ways to control information, what would be your primary method of escape?
I think that's a good question, because I think there's multiple ways to do it. One thing he posted particularly about what the event with Luigi is, that CEOs just have to be ruthless and all that stuff.
Oh, by the way, we this channel, you can say assassination. He fucking killed the CEO. It's fine. I don't care. I'm never gonna get monetized, so I don't give a shit. He fucking shot the guy in the head. It bled out.
What if YouTube loves you? You get a call from the CEO. Man, you're exposing the truth. No, okay. But regardless, he said CEOs should be, and I got to thinking, well, getting outside of the NCAP framework, you look at things differently. Particularly, you look at it differently and say, wait, production can happen good under capitalism, so how can you do that? And Noam Chomsky actually said to Zachary Marlowe, and I'm saying the same thing here, you can go watch my thing with Zachary Marlowe, Post-Capitalist Alternatives, on my Essential Libertarians channel. Hopefully I'll be streaming there tomorrow. But you can, the best way to do it would be workers' co-ops, cooperation, Tulsa, things like that. If you want to do it in the tech side, there's something called a DAO, which is just called a decentralized autonomous organization, where someone creates a company, they renounce ownership, maybe they still take a portion of it, like Satoshi Nakamoto. That Satoshi is the prime example. No one knows who he is. He has tons of Bitcoin, but he's helping people. So you create companies, you renounce ownership, you let people self-manage themselves, and you only jump in those companies when you need to. Encouraging that model will make these CEOs who are just I'm going to be ruthless, eventually die out. And that's why they hate unions. I really believe Musk, Bezos, all those people hate unions, not because they're like, because they know when people self-manage and get things done on their own and work together and figure out how to automate, they can do better than when they have an owner who just takes. That being said, though, I think it's much more than escaping Elon Musk or escaping Donald Trump or escaping it's escaping a whole spider web of a system that has existed since the ancient Egyptians, maybe since Sumeria, and we're still fighting it. So it's gonna be a long fight. The best thing I also think too is to actually take, on a political level, take what Adam Kokesh wanted to do, which was just getting elected president and getting rid of the federal government. And I said, they'll never let you do that. But I actually sat there and said, okay, Michael Heiss has a good idea. Let's decentralize at the local level. But I said, here's the problem. That technically it's illegal to formally secede, for a town to formally secede. But there's nothing in the book saying that you can't win local elections and then have sheriffs or mayors nullify all federal and state laws. That effectively is secession. I don't know if that would qualify under Keith's method of pan-secession. Those are the ways you can get away from these bigger systems. That's what I think we need to do. Honestly, Sam Altman is another problem with ChatGPT. I don't like ChatGPT. That should be decentralized. I'm not saying people shouldn't use AI. I'm probably going to. But if we have AI, let's decentralize it on multiple different nodes. That's what I would say. And another person I don't like, I'll just name off, is Michael Saylor. I do not like Michael Saylor. I feel he is too statist. Even though he has tons of Bitcoin, I'm not a fan of MicroStrategies. And then he sounds like an MIC guy. Our enemy is China and Russia. Shut up.
Yeah.
They're annoying.
The enemy is always more likely within. So,
yeah.
Let's I guess then do some wrapping statements, and then I want to set up a part 2. If I do, I'll let y'all know, and we can start drilling down on some of the more like the more industrialist aspects of Elon Musk, because I do want, that's the thing, I want a variety of perspectives on this channel, and so like Aaron's got the pro Elon Musk perspective that I will fucking never have, very likely, because I hate him with a burning passion. I hated Elon Musk before it was cool. I've hated him for half a decade now, and like a little bit over that if you count me starting to question him, like before I even moved out of SoCal, which, by the way, for all the people in chat who say, come to SoCal and you'll find out how it is, I'm from SoCal. I don't know if you can tell by the way my voice sounds, but I'm from fucking SoCal. Like, I moved to Spokane, Washington, like 5 or 6 years ago, and I do like it better here than the SoCal desert where I'm from, but like, it's this place, the place where I was from certainly wasn't anything to be desired. And I'm certainly not in favor of Newsom or any of the Democrats' policies. This channel, for those of you who are new here, is basically like me, and usually the guests that I have on are virulently anti-Democrat. We're also just anti-Republican as well. So, like, the fact is, you'll probably hear a lot that you agree with when we cover Democrats, but we also cover Republicans, and when we do, we're pretty even-keeled and reasonable about it. So feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Join this group of people who is willing to have like real conversations about this shit, even if people disagree. Like, even if people have strong contentions, we will at least hear you out.
Hey, Jeremy, I'm a Republican. You see my background.
Yeah, right? Yeah, not that kind of Republican.
From Catalonia.
Yeah. But so you're absolutely not a terrorist. You're using YouTube as a mean for dialogue. I fully respect anyone's opinions. Never has stated I support or condemned Luigi. However, if you Google it, yeah. Well, see, that's the thing, though. I'm not gonna say whether he is or isn't. I mean, because it's not helpful. I think one person's terrorism is another person's like self-defense, and I think that one person's terrorism is another person's like officially sanctioned action. I think that terrorism is sort of a buzzword that people use to describe certain like less official forms of violence, because if you think of terrorism as, for instance, trying to use violence to get your political way, there's zero way that most governments don't qualify as terrorist organizations, and that the remainder who aren't those governments don't fall into the toadies or the people who support terrorism's brackets. So, like, it's not to say that there's a dramatic difference between any sort of actions that those people would take in this. Like, just as a real good, strong, stark example, the U.S. government, by any reasonable metrics, did not need to nuke Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they did, and now they've got these big dick bombs to swing around to say, hey, we're the biggest nuclear power, we're the only ones crazy enough to have ever done it, and now you gotta do what we say if you don't want nuclear Armageddon. And so, like, basically, the U.S. government is terrorism. The U.S. government's been doing terrorism for a really long time, and when it hasn't been actively doing terrorism, it's been funding terrorists through things like Operation Cyclone and literally backing Bin Laden's camp in Khost, Afghanistan, before the thing that totally wasn't an inside job happened on 9/11. So it's like, I'm not going to make a big difference between somebody like
those Syrian rebels were moderates.
I'm not going to make a big like level of difference between, for instance, Luigi Mangione's like Mangione's, I don't care, actions in terms of the terrorism level, and for instance, brutally beating and then shoving a knife up Gaddafi's ass. It's not really like people like to pretend that there's some level of civility, and that means that the society that they support and love is not doing just the same shit that they claim to condemn, but it's all bullshit. It's all veneers, yo. So, that's my take.
Since 1945, the United States government has been the world's leading terrorist organization.
Yes.
I mean, if you could define a terrorist in the conventional sense of somebody who tries to, force people to do what you want through terrorizing them, including killing innocents and that kind of thing, well, that's what the American government has been doing it's been doing that its entire history. But I'd say since about 1945, the American government's been the world's leading terrorist organization. You could argue they had rivals or even superiors prior to that, but that's what the American government is. It's the world's leading terrorist organization. And even when it comes to these guys like Luigi, right? What is the big deal about Luigi? All right, he killed the CEO. All right, in the United States, we have about 20,000 murders per year, and about the clearance rate on murder. Clearance rate is a law enforcement term for actually solving the case. Mm-hmm. Right? The clearance rate on murder is something like 57%. Right, that means about half of all murderers get away with it. Right, so I mean, and you look at how this Luigi guy is being treated by the authorities. Like they made a big display of parading him in front of the cameras, and Eric Adams is there walking behind him. Well, why is that? Well, the issue with Luigi is not the crime; it's who the victims were. Or who the victim was. It's the same thing with October the 7th, right? Or even September 11th. In both of those cases, it's not the crime; it's who the victims were.
Yeah.
The Middle East has experienced a 9/11 a week for something like 25 years. It's
and like, October 7th, yeah, but Nakba. How about that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Again, it's not the crime; it's the victim that matters. I mean, if Luigi had killed a liquor store clerk in a robbery, nobody would care. They probably wouldn't even investigate the case if it involved doing any actual work. So so that's it's all of this is status based. Like law and justice in the real world are status based. It's like you get as much justice as you can buy, and then some.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of buying justice, Elon Musk has pretty deep pockets, and we'll give like I'll give both of you real quick, like 30 seconds, minute to plug where you can be found, and then when we do a part two, we can dive into those pockets and see how much they're stained with the cum of fellow billionaires and politicians. So, Kareem, where can you be found?
You can find me on Facebook, Kareem M. Mays, Kareem6633 on Twitter, Kareem Mays on Blue Sky. You can also find me on Discord on Jeremy's Discord server, EXE, and on the Mad Liberty Project with Comrade Bread, Red Pirate, and on a bunch of other Discord servers and Anarch Unity. Let's go.
Kareem or Keith, you're both of your names start with K, so it's like my brain was like, nope.
I am the chief editor of a website called attackthesystem.com. If you go to the homepage of that, you can actually find a link where you can follow my personal social media as well. I'm on Facebook. I have an active Facebook page and then a backup Facebook page under my first name. My full name is Troy Keith Preston. Keith Preston was sent to Facebook electric chair multiple times, so that's why Troy Preston is on Facebook. But I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now under T Keith Preston. And then Troy Keith Preston is on Substack as well. I'm on Substack. And then I'm on Instagram and MeWe. I'm not as active on those sites.
Yeah, because MeWe sucks asshole. So, all right, I'll just finish this off by saying, first off, anyone new here, feel free to like, share, subscribe. If you don't like the video, dislike it and send it to exactly 2 group chats with hundreds of people who agree with you so that they can also hate it. The more hatred, the merrier. We are here to have reasonable conversations. I hope... See, because the thing is, I title these things like an asshole because it works to bring people in, but I hope after you hear from us that we come off as maybe a little bit more reasonable than you expect. So, with all that being said, my goal with this stream was to have candid conversations about Elon Musk, and I really don't like the man. And the next one will be focused more, the next one about Elon Musk will be focused more directly on Elon Musk. There's going to be some stuff between now and then that we do that will be like on other subjects. But the next one on Elon Musk will be a part 2 to this one, and it will be more focused on him. Because now that we've laid the framework for quite a bit of this stuff, we can really drill down on some of this stuff that he did and does in specific. But the general gist of it is, Elon Musk to me is a giant, state capitalist cocksucker of billionaires around the world and power structures everywhere. He is funding the structures that he claims to hate and then hating them as a means of getting the traction that he needs to collect more money to fund them. And he's a massive hypocrite, a false prophet, and I hope to be able to smash him even more, because if we don't get rid of people like Elon Musk, who are bankrolling and rhetorically and materially supporting the status quo and the way that things have been, the powers that oughtn't be, we will never fucking smash the state.